Hi, everyone. Welcome to our roundtable. I'm Breanna. Today, I have Camryn and Josh with me, and we're going to be talking about college football realignment after Texas and OU join the SEC. Josh, first off, what are your thoughts?
Well, I believe Texas and OU joining the SEC is a good thing. First off, that they're going to bring in a lot of money, a lot of fans, a lot of views to the SEC. But for the other conferences, I think it's a problem. I mean, we've seen conferences scramble to find teams to replace them. The Big 12, they added Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, and BYU, which BYU is independent, so that really doesn't hurt anybody. But those other three teams all came from the American Athletic Conference. And so it's kind of like just you go down the chain. I mean, every conference is struggling to find people to replace the ones they've lost, which is definitely not a good thing.
Yeah, Camryn, I don't know about you, but I kind of think that the Pac-12 and Big 10 and ACC are going to combine to try and blunt the decision that the SEC made. What do you think?
I definitely think something to that. I think that with the the Big 12, we'll see in the coming years what happens. If it ends up folding, I think that the Big 12 teams will end up splitting off. Some will go to the Pac-12, some to the Big 10. So that's something that, kind of have to wait for. I know that with OU and Texas heading over to the SEC, that makes a 16-team conference, I believe, and then that brings in the whole topic of should we go to multiple super conferences, which I personally disagree with. I don't see that working out too well, but that's my thought on that.
I will say, Breanna, the one thing that I don't agree on is I don't think a lot of conferences will combine. Personally, I think that there will be some conference or teams moving conferences, but especially with the Power Five, we could see one of those conferences completely disappear entirely. But with the smaller conferences, I mean, especially with Conference USA, they lost so many teams. They're down to 7 teams now, which they added 3 new teams recently. I believe that was Liberty, New Mexico State, and Jacksonville State. But that still leaves them way too short to be a complete conference. They either are going to have to find new teams or they're going to just be completely disbanded.
Yeah. Now, Camryn, if we were to move into looking at the SEC and everything that's happening inside our own division, what do you think is going to happen matchup-wise to the SEC?
Well, I think there's certainly some consideration as to how you split up the then 16 teams, whether you go from east to west or north to south, or even, considering the quadrants. I think in doing that, you will lose some big rivalry games. If you go north-south, then I'm assuming that Oklahoma and Texas would no longer play each other every year, and that has always been a very big rivalry historically. Then if you're talking splitting up the east and west wise, then east and west wise, you start to lose other big rivalry competitions. So I think strategically you've got to put some planning into that. I'm probably more in favor of a quadrant kind of section.
Yeah.
That way you can still, get a little bit of a mix up in there, but
That's where my brain was going. I think that instead of doing north and south or east and west, it would be easiest to split the SEC into 4 pools or 4 divisions where we would be with, say, Oklahoma, Texas, and TAMU. And we would play those 4 teams, and then on a rotating basis, we could play like 2 other teams from another division, and every few years it would cycle through. That would keep Arkansas where we are now in really good standing based on the records that TAMU, Texas, and OU have, especially after OU lost their coach. What do you think, Josh, about how Oklahoma is going to fare in the future with their coach?
I think for the next few years, they'll probably hit a rough spot, depending on their coaching hire. Of course, they could bring in someone and revive the program instantly, but especially with losing Lincoln Riley to USC, that's going to be a big problem because they've already lost multiple commitments, and this is really going to hurt their class next year. It's going to be interesting to see how they bounce back from this and what the students and the athletes there, what they're going to do. If they're going to next year come back and hit them hard and show everyone that it doesn't matter who's their coach, they can still compete, or if this is just they've lost their spirit and they're just going to decide to sit down and take it.
Yeah.
I do want to add on to that. You mentioned their OU's losing commits due to Lincoln Riley leaving. At what point since Oklahoma's coming to the SEC, sure they're losing recruits now, but how many recruits will they gain by becoming an SEC school?
I mean, I believe coming to the SEC, it'll definitely give them a bounce back and definitely get them some more recruits. But until we see who they hire, and depending on what other staff comes in, I feel like they're going to just take a beating for now.
I think that's all great stuff. Unfortunately, we're out of time. So until then, I'm Breanna, Camryn, Josh, thanks for joining. Okay.